Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of UFO aliens and weird stuff. And, obviously, my map of weird. Right now, but before we go any further, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you can. Likes are really important and they help my content get noticed. So please like and subscribe. Alright, because if you do like it, apparently, it helps my content get out there. Apparently. Well, who would have known? No, who would have known? And if you want to follow the map and its course, because it's starting to build up, then obviously like and subscribe if you can, and follow my YouTube channel, right? Okay, so now I'll get all my information, well, most of it, but well, actually, most of it, all of it, really, from a website called UFO Insight, all right? Now, it's written by Marcus Lowe. Check it out. It's well worth the subscription. All right, and you can find some fascinating stories on there. So, like, I type in, United Kingdom, and something always crops up. Now, this story begins in early October 1996 in Skegness. And Skegness is on the northern side of the map, because we go as far as Staffordshire on this one, Nottingham up there, right? Well, Skeggy is right at the bottom. You know, we British call it Skeggy. Used to do many scooter rally out there, Skegness, right? It's in Lincolnshire in the United Kingdom. Now, several reports will come in from the public of strange lights hovering over the sea off the coast of England. What's more, these apparent anomalous objects were picked up by the military radar. In fact, the sighting received such coverage in the national newspapers that the sighting was brought up in UK Parliament. And I'd never heard of it. I always thought I was a massive UFO fan. It wasn't until I got into doing this sort of thing. No, mate, there's some great stories out there. What also makes this incident more intriguing is that there were many similar sightings of strange aerial objects in the region of the United States in 1996, which also coincided with waves of sighting over Scotland and Ireland. Just what was buzzing the skies over the UK during the time? And are they all connected? A question we have to ask ourselves. Hey, once in your lifetime, are these sightings connected and are they UFOs, right? Now, as we will see, an apparent explanation was put forward for the sighting that would become to known as the Boston Stump Incident. An explanation that was embraced in some quarters and rejected as being part of a cover-up in others. Now, I can understand that. However, many of the other sightings that, by and large, received much less coverage in the media remained unexplained. So, the Boston Stump might be one explanation for one particular part of this story, but not all of it. And sightings of UFOs have been steadily rising in the UK throughout the 1990s, with an apparent surge of incidents reported in the middle of the decade. I was too busy raving then. I wouldn't have known. Anyway, just what was taking place in the skies of the United Kingdom during the middle of the years of the 1990s remain unexplained. And this surge of activity certainly deserves further investigation and examination and putting on the map behind us, right? Before we look at some of those other encounters, though, we will return our attention to the east coast of England in the late autumn of 1996. Skegness, right? The beginning of the Boston Stump Incident. Now, in the early hours of the 5th of October 1996, police in Skegness, Lincolnshire, on the east coast of England, there it is, right, reported a strange red and green rotating light overhead to the Yarmouth Coast Guard, who in turn reported the incident to the RAF, right? Now, the report would state that there were many people observing it, and it looked strange as it's stationary. Even more remarkable, there were no aircraft sounds in the area. All right, so, and this is what I believe the Coast Guard and the police getting involved. From there, the RAF Air Rescue at Kinloss in Scotland was made aware of the apparent unfolding situation, right? They would respond that they had no indication of any aircraft in distress in the area. Okay, now air defence radar at RAF Neaton's Head were alerted. Now, following several standard checks, one of the air traffic controllers at the base noticed an anomaly on his radar screen. Now, according to his data, the object was hovering directly over Boston. That's in Lincolnshire, right? Which matched many of the reports now coming in from the public. Of even more concern, because there was no transponder, right, they realised whatever they were dealing with wasn't an aircraft. And remember the Boston Stump theory, all right? Shortly after the night turned even stranger when further confirmations were coming in. The public was seeing this. Remember that, right? Controllers at nearby RAF Waddington discovered another unknown object on their screens. Now, given that there were 3 commercial airliners due to pass through the area in question very shortly, all 3 were asked to report any strange aircraft or objects. Okay, hang on a second. So the object remained hovering in the same place for around 9 hours, even remaining on the radar screen long after the break of dawn. Now, it was at this point where the suggestion was put forward that what was showing on the radar screen was what they call a permanent echo. This was essentially the creation of tall buildings that register on radar. In this case, it was put forward that that was the spire of the local church, which stretches just over 270 feet in the air. So this echo, this permanent echo that lasted nearly 9 hours, sounds like it was just a blip in the radar system, all right? What it was picking up was the church spire. In fact, this spire is referred to as the Boston Stump by those local to the area, a moniker that is often applied to the sighting in question. Now, it's called the Boston Stump Incident. According to the writings of a Dr. David Clark, it was only because of the UFO reports that had been made to the RAF that this anomalous blip was even picked up in the first place, with it normally being ignored as nothing but a permanent echo. Now, was this the case of an over-eager traffic controller adding 2 and 2 together by picking up the permanent echo in light of the UFO reports that they had heard coming in? And I'm going to go, that is a definite, right? So we know this blimp, right, I'll call it a blimp, a permanent echo, was the tower. But that doesn't explain all the other sightings. It is certainly a possibility, but perhaps not as probable as we might first think. Now, I've got to explain who David Williams is, right? David William Clark, born in 1967, is an investigative journalist, reader and lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University, England. He has a long life interest in folklore, phenomena and extraordinary personal experiences. He is frequently consulted by the national and international media on UFOs and acted as a curator for the National Archive UFO project from 2008 to 2013. And I thought I'd throw that in so we know who is this bloke, right? Now, when we take into account the UFO reports themselves, it was clear that people in the Boston and wider Lincolnshire area were seeing something. And furthermore, the same Coast Guards who had alerted the military had also alerted any ships or vessels in the North Sea area. And their response was intriguing to say the least. So the Coast Guard definitely saw something. So even though we had the permanent blimp, or whatever you want to call it, the radar echo, it doesn't explain all of it, all right? Now, following their request for any sightings or information, those already out on the cold October waters of the North Sea, off the eastern English coast, some of the responses were more than intriguing, right? One of those who responded was the crew of the tanker MV Conocast. Now, they would report back to the Coast Guard that they could see 2 groups of strange lights that they couldn't identify nor explain. What's more, these lights had appeared at around 2 a.m. and remained overhead until well after daybreak. Now, as the sun took over the sky, the lights become less and less visible until they disappeared completely. They would further describe the lights as flashing, changing colours from red to blue, then to green, and then to white. Now, indeed, these sightings by the boat crew, as well as those by the police and members of the public, meant that the military couldn't simply dismiss the sightings as a permanent echo. Instead, they began to contemplate it as some kind of natural phenomena. Might have been, well, some sort of natural phenomenon might have been responsible for the visual sightings. although the flashing lights that change colour would surely at least suggest something more mechanical. And I am not buying the natural thing. All right, green, blue, red and white lights. Can't think of anything natural myself. So there are many sightings over North Sea, definitely. However, one of the police officers who witnessed the aerial phenomena, a PC Dave Leyland, managed to capture footage of it hovering stationary above the town after watching it for almost 2 hours. It was Leyland's conclusion that what he and his colleagues had watched and filmed were likely a planet or a particularly bright star. This was also the conclusion of the Royal Greenwich Observatory, which claims that the planet Venus had been particularly bright in the early hours of the night in question, and almost certainly what was witnessed. I am not buying that, right? Astronomer Ian Ridpath would also further give explanations for the other sightings that evening, as well as the apparent flashing colours that were reported. He would state that a pair of bright stars on opposite sides of the sky, Sirius and Vega, would explain the apparent objects witnessed by the crew on the waters. As for the changing colours, Ridpath would offer that there was simply an optical illusion caused by the atmosphere distorting the stars and how we see them. All right, okay, I can't argue with it. I'm not a specialist, right? But I look at stars all the time, and I never see that myself. And don't forget the witnesses on the ground. Now, he would appear that they say the case is closed. However, as we might imagine, not everybody was ready or willing to accept these explanations. And I don't blame you. Just what was hovering off the east coast of England, whether because of the intense media coverage the case had received, not least as it appeared to have been confirmed by military radar, many people became convinced that the explanation offered by the military were nothing short of a cover-up. In fact, as David Clark, we've just spoke about him, points out, so frenzied was the reaction to the headlines that a member of Parliament, a Martin Redmond, even wrote to then the Defence Minister, a Michael Portillo, about the incident, asking why no aircrafts were scrambled when an uncorrelated target was picked up so close to the UK coast, even accusing the RAF of having no idea what was going on. Now, when this letter was made public, the RAF announced that they would conduct an investigation into the incident. Now, this would result in a 23-page report that were released following the month in November 1996. It would conclude that while the RAF was correct in not scrambling jets on the night in question, not all of the sightings could be explained away as planets or stars, elaborating that there were evidence that alarming or extraordinary events were being witnessed by several people, and that is the RAF report. This report, in some people's mind, only strengthened the notion that something out in the ordinary was taking place that evening off the east coast of England. So what do you think? What do you think of that one, right? So obviously there's nothing really massive about it. We haven't seen a cigar-shaped UFO. We haven't seen a pyramid-shaped UFO. And there is a possible explanation about the radar blip. But loads and loads of people, including the police, including the Coast Guard, including those people on the ship, and I'm not buying them as stars, because these people out in the North Sea know a star when they see them. All right, imagine they have no light pollution. They are used to seeing lovely, beautiful, starry nights. They thought that was something weird. So I'm going to say that was a UFO, an unidentified flying object. Well, well, this was UFO, aliens and weird stuff. Thanks for sticking around. Look, this is Christmas. I want to wish you the bestest of all the Christmases. And if you don't celebrate it, that's cool. That's cool. Still have a drop of wine, you know, and enjoy the holidays. And I will see you next year. Thanks very much.